We can bring in Danielle Bett now, Communications Director at Yachad, a British Jewish organisation. She joins us from Tel Aviv. Good afternoon, Danielle.
Good afternoon.
And let's talk about that terrible loss on the ground today. 24 Israeli soldiers killed in Gaza. And it would seem that, it was they were left very exposed on the ground, weren't they? They went in there to basically detonate a building and then they became sitting targets. So how is that going down amongst the Israeli population today?
Yeah, the IDF is investigating the incident, but I just want to contextualize that in Israel today is a day of mourning. Everyone in Israel knows someone who is serving, people who until October 7th were ordinary citizens, they're reservists who are children, parents, friends, and have now been called to serve. Which in no way, shape or form is comparing to civilian casualties in Gaza or elsewhere, but it's simply to explain that this constant news of death of soldiers puts a lot of public pressure on the government because more and more people are questioning the validity of this war as they see their loved ones' lives being lost and the price being paid is becoming increasingly heavy for Israeli society.
And we saw that yesterday with families storming that finance committee in the Knesset. They were there for something else and then they broke in there and they held up placards and said, you're sitting here and our loved ones are still being held hostage. We know it's about 130 and 30 may already be dead. So are we reaching a tipping point, do you think? We're hearing one narrative from Netanyahu's cabinet, but what is the feeling amongst the general Israeli population, do you think?
I certainly think the narrative and the discussion in Israel is very different than it was in October or November. More and more people are questioning the war. We're seeing that fighting is not saving any hostages. Every single day is risking hostage lives. We're seeing more and more first-hand accounts from Israelis who were held hostage in Gaza saying that there is physical and psychological torture. We know that people are being raped, starved, God knows what else, and their lives are at risk. How further can we push them? How much longer can we leave these people in Gaza under Hamas being held hostage without signing a deal to release them? So there are more protests, growing public pressure, and more people really questioning how can we possibly win this war? How many more deaths can we bear?
It's interesting because there was a poll from a university, a Hebrew university, which actually polled in the last 48 hours. 51.3% of Israelis favour Joe Biden's proposal, which is an exchange of hostages and a pathway to a Palestinian state. That just tips the balance, obviously, as a slight majority. But, how do people see that coming about? Because on the one hand, there must be support to try and, wipe out Hamas for everything they've done. But as you say, is that being held against what the losses on the Israeli side and a weariness for everything that people are going through on both sides of this divide right now?
Yeah, so firstly on the polling, I think whilst it's a small majority, actually, this is the first time in a very long time that Israelis have had to face the question of what is the long-term solution, because the status quo is killing us and it's killing Palestinians and it clearly cannot go on. We can't go back to what was before October 7th, which was constant rounds of war, managing the conflict. Managing the conflict has killed us. But the problem is that we have a government that isn't interested in the long-term resolution. We know that the most far-right minister in the government, Itamar Ben-Gvir, stated publicly yesterday, if there's no war, there's no government. So that we know that Netanyahu is under public pressure to keep this war going, under political pressure to keep the war going. All polls show that he would not be able to win an election. And you can't help but question what are his political considerations, because his ability to stay in power is at stake. And so there are clearly political considerations at play. And does this government actually want a long-term resolution? I think not.
Danielle, thank you so much for joining us. Danielle Bett, the Communications Director at Yachad. It's a British Jewish organisation. She was speaking to us live from Tel Aviv.